Coming to you from the Deep South, this is the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast. High impact leadership is not reserved for leaders, and it has nothing to do with your position, title, or rank. However, it does have everything to do with your character. It's time to climb to the next level and beyond, personally and professionally. Now, let's start making it happen with your host, Max Story.
Hello, and thanks for listening to the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast today. Today, I want to share with you some thoughts on recruiting. And I hope you listen, even if you're a frontline entry-level worker, if you're in the workforce today, or you may be in a support role, no one reports to you at this moment in your life, in your career. I hope you go ahead and listen today, because the things I share on my podcast, they're going to advance your career no matter what level you're at now. But if you're on the front lines and you think you're ever going to have an aspiration to climb the ladder, whatever that means literally for you, whether it's pay or promotions, whether it's being a formal authority leader of others, I give you tips and thoughts on leadership and personal growth and development that are going to help you. And even if you never want to do that, I'm going to give you some insights that are going to help you understand the big picture. And you may decide to do that because you figure out the rest of the world doesn't have a clue most of the time. So I'm giving you some good insight. But I want to share with you some tips. A book I started reading recently. I actually started reading it on the 4th of July. And the title of the book is Simplify. If you've been in the Marine Corps, you already know what that is. If not, you may have heard it and maybe don't know, but Simplify means always faithful. That's the title of this book. The subtitle of this book is Business Leadership the Marine Corps Way. It's by Dan Carrison and Rod Walsh. So I'm not going to read you the book. I may read you a quote or two from it, but I want to add to it, add my own context. So I'm going to mix a lot of my own thoughts in with a few of their thoughts. But I did want to mention the book to you, introduce it to you. Who knows? I haven't read that much of it, although I started reading it on July the 4th. I'm actually recording this podcast on July the 4th. So even though you may be listening to this several weeks later, I'm just getting into the book myself, and I may reference some more things as I get into it. But I'm liking it so far, and I'm only a few pages into it. But it inspired me to talk a little bit differently about my last episode, and also to introduce you into some thoughts on recruiting, because recruiting matters. But unfortunately, to a lot of organizations, it doesn't matter. But I guarantee you, to the military, it matters. And I joined the Marine Corps in 1987, and I got to meet a Marine recruiter. I got to go to Parris Island. I got to meet drill instructors. And then I got into doing what I was there to do, which was to be an infantryman. So then I got to go to infantry school and meet some infantry instructors. And then for me, I was in Marine Corps Reserve, and at that time it was a Desert Warfare Infantry unit, basically from 87 to 91. And so I went and did what we done back those days. So anyway, one of the quotes when I opened chapter 1, and this is something I talk about a lot, but there are a couple of quotes from a couple of different folks, and I just want to reference them because I'm going to talk to you about recruiting for your team. A lot of leaders, they don't even think about. They don't give 2 cents of thought to who's doing their recruiting. They just need, unfortunately, you hear a lot of leaders out there in the blue collar world, they just need a warm body. If you hear leaders talking about needing warm bodies, you need to take your warm body and go work somewhere else, because they don't care about you. They just care about having you there to do some work. So if you're hearing that kind of language, that may be the old rough and tough blue collar way, but it ain't the way of a high impact leader, no matter what industry they're in, that cares about their people. A leader with high character would never talk like that about their people, because they actually care about the people. They're not just looking for somebody to plug into a slot to get some work done so they can get their check or get their bonus. Anyway, so hope you stick with me. I'm going to give you some insight again about recruiting, how to fill the positions in your organization. It may be about filling in the frontline entry-level positions. It may be about filling in temporary positions. It may be about filling in white collar positions, support role, executive type positions. These principles apply to anyone, but I'm going to share some different stories and different thoughts. But chapter 1 in this book, Semper Fi, is actually titled Attracting the Best. And these authors are starting out, Carrison and Walsh, they're starting out talking about recruiting. And think about the military. They bring everybody in at the bottom, and they grow and develop them and build them up over time. That's how they do it. And they do the United States military does some amazing things with some amazing people, and they make a lot of stuff happen. But they bring people in, and then they grow and develop them from within. So they pay a lot of attention on who they're getting. But their first chapter is titled "Attracting the Best." A couple of quotes here I want to share with you from the beginning. He says, "This is Major General Jack Klemp, and he was head of a Marine Corps recruiting command in Washington, D.C. But he says, we recruit what we are. And if you've been listening to me long enough, you know I always talk about who we are is who we attract. Who we are as an organization, meaning cumulatively, meaning the culture of our organization, determines who we attract. And then as individual leaders, who we are determines who we attract to our specific team and who we repel. And then when you talk about the personal side of it, who we are determines who we attract at a personal level, who our friends are, who our spouse is going to be or not going to be. Another quote from Vernon R. Lux Jr., I think. He's chairman, or was chairman and chief executive officer of Baxter International. And he was formerly a first lieutenant in the United States Marine Corps. And I'll just tell you, this book, I just started reading it, but it was published in 1999. So, I'm sure these folks are not doing the same exact thing they were doing back then. It's been a while, 23 years to be specific, since this book was published. But one of the things they talk about here, and they talk about recruiters should be the cream of the crop. You think about that. Think about that relative to your company, whether you're the top leader or you just work in the company at some other capacity. There's a good chance you know something about the recruiting efforts the company makes. You may not know anything, but there's a good chance you do. But if you're in an HR role or management role, executive role, definitely as an owner or a CEO, if you were to be listening, are your recruiters the cream of the crop, or are they just somebody with a job to do, and their job is to get some warm bodies, or to get a body, or to get somebody? And who are they? But relative to the Marine Corps recruiting, no amount of funding, marketing, and advertising or support can make up for weakness in the person behind the desk. And that's a direct quote from Carrison and Walsh out of Semper Fi. They say no amount of funding, marketing, and advertising support can make up for weakness in the person behind the desk. What they're talking about, you think about the Marine Corps marketing campaign out there. You've probably seen it on TV or read it on signs someplace or both. Saw videos on online, social media, all over the place these days. What they're saying here, all those millions of dollars on all this. Marine Corps got some amazing, get you fired up, pumped up, motivating and inspiring marketing campaigns, good stuff. Most of the military has that. But here I'm speaking about the Marines as a Marine, and I'm quoting Marines from this book. But what they're saying is all of that money, all that marketing, all that advertising, it can't make up for weakness in the person behind the desk. They're talking about the recruiter. When somebody comes to join the military, in this case in the Marine Corps, They're going to go in and meet the recruiter. When somebody goes to a job fair, who's at the job fair? I know in my career, it was usually some HR folks, and that was about it. A lot of times they were assistants in the HR department or interns. They were not the cream of the crop from inside of our company. A lot of times they were just people who had time. They just go out and grab somebody to go participate. It just depends. Think about that though. You're trying to if you actually care what type of people you're attracting into your organization, you need to get some motivational and inspirational people who are loyal to your organization, who actually like working there. They're probably going to be able to sell your company quite a bit better than an intern who don't know anything about the organization. It's kind of like you've heard me talk about, if you had to climb to the top of Mount Everest, would you rather follow a tour guide or a travel agent? Travel agent ain't never been there. They can tell you all about it. They can read off the pamphlet, show you some pictures. They can read some stuff to you, tell you all about it, but they ain't never been there. Tour guide, they've been to the top and the bottom and the top and the bottom, and they've taken people with them. They love what they do. They fired up about it. Which one of those people would you rather follow? Which one you think could sell you on the challenge, on the mission? And something else that these authors say, they say nobody joins the Marines to become a recruiter. That makes a lot of sense. Nobody joined the Marines to become a recruiter. Yet they pull the best and the brightest and put them in that recruiting slot on purpose. Yes, they're the best and the brightest. They're the cream of the crop, using Carrison's and Walsh's words. They could be making an impact doing their real job and probably would rather be doing their real job. But like they say in this book, attracting the right kind of individuals is considered critical for the well-being of the Marine Corps. It's part of the mission. I've got another book I'm reading. I've been pecking away at it for a while. It's actually a leadership manual from the Marine Corps, a big, thick instructional manual that they use to actually teach leadership. And I'm studying those principles. The best leaders do all this stuff authentically in the military, all the principles that they teach. But even if you're not going to do it authentically in the military, which is absolute best, that's high impact leadership, you still going to do it because they're going to teach you how to be a high impact leader, and then you got to follow those principles. Now, if you're not doing it authentically, you're only doing it because you have to, because you happen to be in the Marine Corps and they're telling you how you have to lead, and you're only doing it because you have to, you're going to get the results of somebody who's not living authentically as a leader. So there's a lot of leaders in the military. They're terrible leaders. They doing the bare minimum to be able to stay in the military, and they're getting the bare minimum results with their people. But they're still following the leadership textbook, but they're doing it because they have to, which really makes them a manager of people, not a leader of people, as you always hear me talk about. So if you're using a guidebook or a policy manual or any kind of manual to tell people how to be and expect them to be that way while they're at work, if they're only doing it because they have to, they're still managers of people. It's still management of people. It's got to be authentic for it to be true high impact leadership of people. But just getting into this book, I really like what these guys are talking about and how they're taking the Marine Corps model and kind of overlaying it into the business world, into the civilian world. They say success as a recruiter is a virtual guarantee of promotion. If you can go bring in top recruits who can make it through boot camp, and I'm just speaking, from my own words. I'll tell you when I'm pulling something out of their book to share with you. But when you can bring them in, they can pass the test, they can go join their team, and they can be successful. You've been effective as a recruiter. So you got to live and model what you're teaching and expecting. You got to build trust. You got to be authentic. A lot of times recruiters get bad raps, and maybe some of them deserve it if they're not being honest. If they're being leaders, they're going to be honest and authentic, and they're going to be able to sell, in this case, the Marine Corps to somebody who wants to buy it. If they're being manipulative, they can sell it to somebody who doesn't want to buy it, and they may flush out. They may not make it. But a lot of those recruiters, what makes them so valuable, and the authors here say it in the books, they say perhaps it is the very eagerness to return to the front that makes the recruiter so credible. What they're talking about is they're talking about the recruiters who love to do their real job, not being a recruiter, but whatever their military occupational specialty, MOS, whatever that is, that's what they want to go do. So when they're out recruiting, they're going to be talking about they can't wait to get back in the field if they are in the field or whatever type work they're doing in the military. If they like it and they can't wait to get back to it, they're going to be all pumped up telling you all about how you going to like it. But they're not just picking some random people out of the Marine Corps to go out and recruit for the Marine Corps. So they, in the book, they used a little metaphor. They said the Marine Corps recruiters are the kingdom's best knights, sent back from the battlefield into the village to gather volunteers. You think about in your organization who the top high performers, character and competency wise, are in the different divisions or different areas or functions within your organization. Most leaders would never take those folks off the job to go do recruiting. High impact leaders will. And if you've done that, you got some high impact leadership traits working for you right there. But most leaders won't do it. But I'm here to challenge you to think about it. My last episode, I talked about what I'm talking to you about now actually inspired me to do that last episode before this episode because I was already going to do it. I just hadn't done it. But when I started reading this, I said, I got to go do that one first and then talk about this one. Because the last episode, I talked about promoting from within. You start understanding if you are going to promote from within, like the Marine Corps or any other branch of the military is going to do, then who you're bringing in is important because you're bringing these people in to develop them. You're not bringing them in expecting them to have a PhD and 20 years of experience or some master's degree or bachelor's degree and all this stuff you see. You're not looking for it on the outside, bring it on the inside. You're looking for the right people to bring on the inside so you can grow and develop them on the inside. Help them become what you need them to be. It's habit 2 from the 7 habits. It's about beginning with the end in mind. But to quote something from the book here, they say, how many companies can say they have sent their best knights out onto the college campuses and job fairs to represent them? More often than not, management hires out this critical responsibility to a third party. Headhunters represent the company, taking on the perceived burden of interviewing and screening so many candidates. The very people who should be there, the top managers and salespeople, who are more qualified than anybody else to recognize potential, remain on the front line, meaning they're still doing the work. Often companies have no idea of who sits behind the booth with their logo on it. That's a paragraph from the book Simplify. And they continue on. I want to read this to you. It says, it's true that many businesses have invested in a human resource department with employees recruiting as part of its mandate. But the motives are usually of a defensive nature. HR is more often used as a shield against litigation from disgruntled employees than as an aggressive outreach agency for quality recruits. In too many cases, the Human Resources Department subs out its recruiting responsibilities to headhunters, abdicating its greatest responsibility. No wonder companies are struggling. No wonder companies have so much turnover. It starts with recruiting. And I already knew this, but when I was reading this, I was like, man, they're saying it in a really cool way, and they're putting a military spin on it. And for me personally, they putting the Marine Corps spin on it. They ask, do your recruiters believe what they say? And like I mentioned earlier, a lot of times the people doing the hiring, they don't even know what they're talking about. They a lot of HR people, their job is to hire some people to give them to a supervisor to go do some work. A lot of times the supervisor never even meets the people until the HR people come out there and hand them off. I cannot even imagine that concept if I was the leader. I know Jason Denham, he's VP of electrical construction at Kilgore Industries out in Texas. He's grown his team from 0 to 130 people, I think it is, somewhere around there, in just under 3 years. He still he still hires every one of them. He still interviews every one of them because he has such a high value on character. And he's been reading and studying this stuff longer longer than anybody on his team. I'm sure he's got some people now that he can value and appreciate to help him, but he still engages with every single person he hires, top to bottom. And I hope he always does it, no matter how big he gets, because it's important. Some point, he may get so big, he's got some other high character people who are helping him, and that'll be all right. I mean, I don't know how big he's going to get, but right now, he still can handle it. He still sees the value of it. But I guarantee you, he ain't going to hand it off to a rookie. He's going to hand it off to a pro, someone who's been with him, who understands, he knows what they value. They value what he values. He values what they value. They on the same team. They both are MVPs. As he grows and develops these people over time, or brings them in who have a track record of already growing and developing themselves, and they just fit on his team, absolutely I can see him trusting somebody like that. They're just becoming an extension of him. Relative to what I'm saying, he's still doing all the hiring. He's just doing it through somebody he trusts. It's very intentional. So something else they say here in this book, this Semper Fi book. Many companies, disappointed with third-party search firms, now rely upon their own in-house human resources departments to recruit new personnel. But many HR people are hired from outside the company, often from the headhunter firms themselves, and have not directly experienced company life long enough or broadly enough to become believers. The Marine Corps would never consider hiring its recruiters from the outside, dressing them in a Marine Corps uniform, and then expect them to exhibit the passionate conviction that should characterize a Marine recruiter. A company that wishes to develop a recruiting effort that will attract the future leaders of the organization should be the best managers and employees in the organization. This cream of the crop will serve for only 1 or 2 years in that role, and will be held to a high performance standard. Now, it may not be 1 or 2 years. It may be 6 months, maybe 2, 3 months. But at the end of their stint, they're rewarded for their successful tour by promotion or other responsibilities within the company. It's exactly what happens to the Marine Corps recruiters. And then other believers in the company, people who are bought in, they'll follow in their footsteps, and they'll be delighted to have such a high profile and important post, meaning job, position, as recruiter in the company, and have the opportunity to bring the best people they can find into the organization they love. Pretty powerful stuff. Most companies, they're not going to do this. High impact leaders who are not doing this, they'll listen to this episode and then they'll start pulling some nuggets from this episode and they'll start figuring out how to do a better job of recruiting. That's why I'm sharing this message. I said it before, but I'm trying to raise awareness. I'm trying to provoke thought in leaders of people who want to build a high performance team. You just want to make a lot of money? There's a lot of ways you can make a lot of money. If you want to help a lot of people, help them make a lot of money, which will in turn help you make a lot of money, everybody wins. You need to consider some of these principles. If you want to look at the big picture, you want to begin with the end in mind, you want to build a phenomenal organization, you need to recruit intentionally, develop intentionally, and then and promote from within. And as they say in Simplify in the book, it's the training, not the screening, that creates Marine Corps leaders of all ranks. Because the model, the high performance team model, that's my words, the Marine Corps eat up with it. It's set up to do exactly what I've been talking about last episode and this episode. Promote from within and develop within. It's common sense. It makes sense. But most organizations out in the business world, in the civilian world, they really ain't focused on the mission. They focused on the money. So they look to take a lot of shortcuts. But the very best companies out there, they're doing all these kind of things. And a lot of times they're doing them with high impact leaders who have been in the military. But again, let me put that warning on you. Just because somebody's been in the military, it does not mean they're a good leader. They may come out in the civilian world and flop all over the place because they were not authentically living that stuff, meaning leadership principles. They were not authentically applying it. They had the Uniform Code of Military Justice, the law, standing behind them. People had to follow. If they could make some decent attempt at leading like they're being taught to lead, then everyone reporting to them, below them in the chain of command, had to follow, or they would be trouble due to the Uniform Code of Military Justice. UCMJ. They don't have that in the civilian world. If somebody don't like you in the civilian world, they can quit and they don't have to come back to work tomorrow. That's kind of a whole different podcast, but I just want to throw that in, these few thoughts. But the Marine Corps attempts to begin with the best through a vigorous screening process. And that happens in every branch of the military. They're just looking all for slightly different type of mission. Each branch of the military overall has a different mission. And how they accomplish the mission is slightly different. So who they're looking for is slightly different. Many things will be the same, but some things are slightly different. So I want to talk about one more quote or thought here from the book before we wrap up this session. These guys, Carrison and Walsh, again, authors of the book Simplify. I hadn't read very far into it. I got a lot of value out of the first 10 or 15 pages today, sharing those with you. But you might want to pick you up a copy and check it out. But they basically say, rather than make applicants leap over an increasingly raised bar, businesses should instead look for the kinds of qualities the Marines search out and let their training programs do the rest. See, that ain't going to work if you don't have a training program. Looking for good recruits, it'd be like the military just hired some good folks and then went and stuck them out into the active duty military. They didn't send them to boot camp. I mean, Marines, 13-week boot camp. That's before you ever get put on the job. You go to 13 weeks of training. That's just boot camp. And then when you leave boot camp, you go through another school. For me, it was infantry school. So I went through 13 weeks of boot camp, and I think it was 8 or 10 weeks of infantry school when I got done. Then I got to go out and do the job. But a proper training and management culture will cultivate the leadership qualities desired. You got to get that, build that, and put it in place. It must be remembered, however, that everything looks good on a resume and that previous experience is difficult to verify and quantify. That's the last quote. Share that directly from Simplify. Hope you got some value out of today's episode. Think about who's doing your recruiting. They're modeling who you are and what you're about. If you got somebody that doesn't even know much about the business or care about the business out there recruiting for you, well, guess what kind of folks you're going to get? Not too good. Talk to you next time.
Make it happen or someone else will. It might as well be you. Are you serious about taking your career and your life to the next level and beyond? Check out Mac Story's Blue Collar Leadership series books and others, now available on audio, along with paperback and ebooks at Amazon, iTunes, and Audible. Please visit bluecollarleadership.com to learn about Mac's books, programs, special offers, certifications, and more. Thank you for listening to the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast.